Welcome, everybody. My name is Laurie Egeth. I'm a supervising advocate with the Community Health Law Project, and I'm here to speak on some of the basics of Social Security disability benefits and SSI benefits. As the title says, what you need to know to apply for, appeal, and keep the benefits once you've been approved for it. There are two different programs that we're talking about today. They often overlap, but sometimes they are very different. There's different eligibility criteria, and they pay out in different ways. Both are for disability, and the way you prove disability is the same. But again, the programs are different. The first program that I'm going to speak about is called the Old Age Survivors Disability Insurance, which many people will think of as Social Security Disability, or some people say SSA, but that actually means Social Security Administration. So it's SSD. So the distinction that you will hear when people are talking about the different programs are SSD, which is what I'm going to talk about now, and the next program, which is SSI. So SSD is exactly, well, the OASDI is exactly what it stands for, Old Age Survivors Disability Insurance. There's eligibility criteria for each category. Old age is for retirement benefits that people get when they can get early retirement at 62. Retirement age now, although it's increasing, is at 67.5, and it's going up to 70. So a person has to work a certain amount of time in order to be eligible for retirement benefits. Survivors benefits are for people, the worker has passed away, and a person can get benefits on that worker's benefits. If they're a child under a particular age, if they're a spouse, a widow, divorced spouse, there's a whole list of criteria that would make a person eligible for those benefits. And the disability insurance, which is what we're speaking about today. And a person can get disability insurance if they have worked a certain amount to be eligible, and our family members, depending on the criteria, may be able to get benefits on that disabled worker's insurance, assuming, again, that the criteria has been met. So Social Security Disability, it's a social insurance program where workers earn coverage for benefits by working and paying Social Security taxes on their earnings. That means that people who work under the table are not paying into the Social Security system, and they may have a long work history, but unfortunately at the end of their work history or at a time when they become disabled, they haven't paid into the system. They don't have any of that insurance that will cover them when they retire or when they become disabled or injured on the job. So that's a consideration when a person starts to work. And the program, again, it provides benefits to the disabled worker and to their dependents, whether it's a spouse, a child, survivors. So the person has to have earned enough quarters of coverage to be insured. And that formula is, in order to be currently insured, they have to have worked 20 out of the past 40 quarters. I don't want to get really technical about it. A quarter of coverage is anytime a person earns $1,640, and that's one quarter. You can't earn more than 4 quarters in a year. So if you earn $1,640 in a year, then you've earned 1 quarter. If you've earned $3,280, you've earned 2 quarters. If you earn $5,000, you've earned 3 quarters. And if you've earned like $7,000, you've earned 4 quarters. If you earned, $150,000 in a year, you still have only earned 4 quarters of coverage. All right. And so basically, if you work continuously, you would have had to have worked 5 out of the past 10 years to be currently covered from your date of disability. All right. So a person is if a person is found disabled and eligible for Social Security disability insurance, they can get their insurance coverage, they'll get their monthly check, and they also will be eligible for Medicare benefits. But there is a 24-month waiting period after the date of their eligibility for cash benefits for them to be eligible for Medicare. There are a variety of other medical insurance programs, New Jersey Family Care, things that can cover the person until the Medicare kicks in. There is a Medicare premium that will come out of the person's Social Security check. And that often is also covered by if a person is eligible for Medicaid or some of the other state programs that are available in New Jersey. The other program is SSI, which stands for Supplemental Security Income. It is a needs-based program or a type of a welfare program, and it's based on a person's current income and their living situation. All right. It is a federal program that has a state supplement. So every state, a person on SSI may receive a different amount. New Jersey's state supplement is $31.25. New York has a higher state supplement, probably because they calculate that it has a higher cost of living. There are states that have zero supplement. So, you know, if a person is on SSI and moves to a different state, they very much need to report their different address because their state supplement may either increase or it will decrease. A person who is eligible, a person may be eligible for SSI based on 3 categories. If they're 65 or older, they're automatically eligible for disability benefits. If they're blind or partially blind, they'll be eligible, or if they're disabled. As opposed to Social Security disability benefits, which I talked about on the previous slide, nobody else in your family can get benefits based on your record. They can get benefits based on their own application for SSI, but because you're on SSI, a dependent will not get benefits based on your record. With SSI, automatically comes Medicaid from the very date of your application. Currently, the maximum rate for a single individual is $945. And for a couple, it's $1,396. There is also a resource limit for SSI, which I should have put on this slide. And that's $2,000 for an individual and $4,000, I'm sorry, $3,000 for a couple. It doesn't, the $2,000 can be in any form. It can be money in the bank. It can be stocks and bonds. It can be insurance policy. They're very it can be property that could be in your name, whether you know it or not. So you have to be very careful about reporting everything that you're aware of. And sometimes things pop up. And if you are over $2,000, you're not eligible for benefits, all right? Or it makes you ineligible for that month. As I said, it's a needs-based program. So the government has determined that if you have money someplace else, you know, they don't need to give it to you. I recently did a case where a person had inherited some property, and the property was deeded to her. The property was worth more than $2,000, actually worth $12,000. But because of that, she was terminated from SSI because she had over $2,000 in resources. She was reluctant to give the property up. It had been in the family for a long time, but without it, I mean, her choice was either to sell it and use the money and get the benefits. I'm sorry, use the income until she was below 2,000 and get back on her SSI, or to keep the property and, you know, figure out had to do without the SSI because they were not going to give it to her while she had the property. And ultimately, she actually deeded the property away and got the money for it. And, you know, we worked it out with SSI. But Social Security finds out about this stuff. So it's not that you can hide resources. You also have to be a citizen of the United States, and there's certain criteria. If you're not a citizen, you may be able to be eligible if you're a legal permanent resident, but have to fit into certain criteria. And for other categories of, you know, for non-residents, you know, to be eligible, there are certain criteria that you have to meet. Okay. In order to be eligible for Social Security disability as an adult, and this is the definition, which, sorry to read it to you, but you have to show that you have the inability to engage in any substantial gainful activity by reason of any medically determinable physical or mental impairment, which can be expected to result in death or last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months. All right. And I'll go into what substantial gainful activity means in a second. But Social Security goes through what they call a sequential analysis. The first step is whether or not you're working. So if you're working and you're earning a certain amount, and the amount constitutes what they call substantial gainful activity. And I'm sorry, I changed other slides. I did not change this one. 2023, the substantial gainful limit is $1,470 a month before any deductions. So if a person is earning that amount of money, Social Security will automatically say, you're earning substantial gainful activity. We can't get past step one. You are not disabled. Now, if you go in and show that it's not substantial gainful activity, meaning not that, you know, yes, I am earning $1,470 a month, but, you know, my Uncle Bob is giving me this money. I'm sweeping his garage floor. He would never hire anybody normally to do this job. The job isn't worth that much money a month, you know, and you get various statements from people to say that. Then you know, you may get past the step one criteria or the step one process. All right. If you're doing volunteer work, but doing something that someone would normally get paid for and putting in like 40 hours a week, they might consider that substantial gainful activity. So just because you're, you know, not earning that same amount of money doesn't mean it's not considered substantial gainful activity. But if you really feel that you can't work and earn a certain amount of money, then you know, a person should consider applying for Social Security benefits, Social Security disability benefits. The second thing that they look at is the impairment severe? And their definition of severity, Social Security's definition, is if it imposes more than a minimal restriction on a person's ability to perform work-related activities. That means, you know, standing, walking, sitting, you know, dealing with the public, you know, stooping, bending, dealing with stress, accepting, you know, following instructions, being able to concentrate, focus, any number of activities. Social Security determines whether the impairment is severe. It doesn't necessarily take much to reach that determination that something is severe. If a person has a back problem and it affects their ability to walk for a long distance, if they have a mental health impairment that affects their ability maybe to be, you know, to be in contact with other people for a long period of time or to focus and concentrate, it may, you know, that would be considered severe. I'll give an idea of an impairment that it would not be severe. You know, a lot of people take, you know, perhaps have high blood pressure and they take medication for high blood pressure. if the medication keeps the person's high blood pressure under control and they don't have any problems with it, then it would not be considered severe. If the person's blood pressure is not controlled by the medication and they have resulting chest pains or constant headaches or dizziness or other things that are related to high blood pressure, then that impairment would be considered severe. The third step is, does the impairment meet or equal a listing? The Social Security guidelines have a whole booklet, and they have listings or criteria for every single body system, for like the musculoskeletal system, the neurological system, mental health impairments, the endocrine system, vision, hearing, anything that where a person can, have a disability or have an illness or an impairment. Social Security has listed criteria as to what it would take to automatically meet this listing and to be eligible for disability benefits. Now, it's often hard to meet a listing that no one meets criteria exactly. And equal, meaning that maybe they have a combination of impairments that make the impairment just as bad. So it doesn't meet a listing, but it's close enough, or, with a couple of impairments, or there's another, it doesn't meet this criteria, but it has this criteria. So together it would meet or equal the listing. But oftentimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't meet the listing, then it goes on to step 4. Can the claimant return to their past work? If they can't return to their past work based on their current impairments, there's things that they cannot do, then the next step would be to go to step 5. If we're still at step 4, if the person didn't have any past work, then they would go automatically to step 5. At step 5, Social Security will determine if there is any other work that the claimant can do. All right. So you have to understand that when Social Security comes up with any other work, they don't find the job for you. They don't figure out how you can get to the job, and they don't necessarily name the particular job where it is. So, for example, if they determine that a person could be a cashier, they don't indicate that there's an opening in a Target or a Walmart or a supermarket. They just say, we think that you have the capability of being a cashier, taking everything into consideration, that you could stand for a certain amount of time, that you could deal with the customers, that you could, use the cash register, that you have the capability of perhaps lifting something heavy and putting into a bag. So they take all that into consideration. All right. They don't make a determination, or they don't take into consideration, as I said before, how you're going to get there. They don't take into consideration how much the job pays and whether it's going to pay your current expenses, your rent, if you have other, your car insurance, child support. They don't take that into consideration. They just, they don't even care whether it's interesting. I mean, because there are plenty of kind of piecework jobs or assembly line jobs where, they kind of characterize taking one small box, putting it into a big box and moving it along the assembly line to the next person. Again, it doesn't have to be an exciting position. And I've had people come to me and say, well, I'm not going to do a job for that money. I used to do this. I used to earn this amount. I'm not going to do that. Or, that's boring. I couldn't possibly do that job for 8 hours a day. If you simply say you can't do it because it's boring, that's one thing. If you can't do it because you couldn't stand there, you would lose focus, you would become anxious, that's something else. But Social Security, again, doesn't have to, name types of jobs that have to be interesting to you. So if Social Security does come up with jobs, then the person is considered to be not disabled. If Social Security find that there are no jobs that you can do that are available in the national economy based on your disability, then you would be eligible for disability benefits. Now, if people are looking to get SSI and disability for children, and I did not include that on this slide, but there is a different criteria for children. Once you turn 18, Social Security looks at your ability to do work. If you're under 18, Social Security looks at a child's ability to do age-related activities, whether it's to be able to care for yourself, relate to other people, various physical activities, various self-care things. So those are completely different criteria that you would have to look into. All right. And again, as I mentioned before, I talked about substantial gainful activity, it's work that is both substantial and gainful. So it requires significant physical or mental activities, even if it's done on a part-time basis, or if you do less or get paid less or have less responsibility. I gave the example of sweeping the floor for your uncle. But if you're doing a part-time job and you're getting paid, Social Security would say you're working 20 hours and you're getting less than that, $14.70 a month. Excuse me, Social Security would look and say, all right, well, you've gotten past the step one, but we're going to look and see whether you would be able to do this on a full-time basis, whether your impairment prevents you from doing that. All right. So just keeping it at part-time doesn't automatically mean that you can't do any type of work. Okay. And then when I said it was gainful, whether if you do it for pay or profit, or usually done for pay or profit, if you opt to do something, as a volunteer, that may not necessarily mean that it's not gainful activity. And in my last paragraph, being able to take care of yourself, taking care of a household, hobbies, social activities are not considered to be substantial gainful activity. And I know if people have applied for Social Security in the past, and oftentimes they'll get denials. And one of the statements on Social Security is, we're denying you because we've determined that you can take care of your personal needs, do household chores, follow simple instructions, and do a simple job. Well, they're not really, they say that in almost all the decisions, but again, being able to take care of yourself doesn't make you not disabled, and being able to take care of your household doesn't mean that you're not disabled. We have clients who have non-physical impairments, meaning, more of a mental health disability or developmental disability, and may be able to shower and wash up, prepare their food, take care of their children, get them off to school, but then kind of collapse for the rest of the day until their kids get back from school or don't really do anything. So all of that has to be taken into consideration. Okay, I told you about the listing of impairments. I guess I'm kind of getting ahead of myself with this. The listings can be found, at this website. There is a separate listing for adults and children. There, not only is there differences for disability, but there's different criteria, for each type of impairment and different criteria that has to be met to meet or equal. Okay. And as I said, they might not equal an impairment, but they might lack the residual functional capacity to perform substantial gainful activity. Kind of mentioned this before, they might have been determined, not to be able to concentrate, not to be able to stand for long periods of time, not to be able to perhaps reach with their arm, You know, there's a lot of physical or mental impairments. You know, they may require, you know, if a person has diabetes and often has, you know, has to time their feeding or when they have a snack or take their insulin, you know, that all may be taken into consideration. They may not have a job that allows them to take a break when they need it, you know, and only has, you know, particular break times, and that may not be good for a person who has like dietary restrictions or, you know, take medication at a certain time, or may have to, you know, their medications make them sleepy and they are, you know, they have to nap in the middle of the day. So all that has to be taken into consideration when making a determination of disability. Okay, our agency, we do specialize in representing clients with mental health impairments and developmental disabilities. We do also do physical disabilities, but as to give you an example, under the mental health impairment category, each impairment has a separate listing of criteria. So just to read them off to you, the neurocognitive, schizophrenia, depression, bipolar, intellectual disorders, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorders, somatic symptoms, and personality impulse control disorders. So it's not enough to just prove the symptoms, but also its impact on the person's ability to function. Medical records, you know, will, you know, indicate that you know, it will give a diagnosis. It will give, you know, what the person is suffering from, but you need to take into consideration the person's symptoms and how it affects them. You know, a person's mental health, you know, or their symptoms may be on, you know, be on a whole spectrum in terms of severity. So I may be anxious because of something that's going on, something that may be coming up in the future. And so occasionally you know, I think about it, or, you know, I have to prepare something for it, or like for today's presentation, you know, maybe I thought about it and it kept me awake a little bit, you know, but I was able to do this, or I'm not done yet, but hopefully I'll be able to complete this. There are other people who have such anxiety that it keeps them from leaving the house. It keeps them from completing anything. It completes them, you know, from any type of movement. And they may have good days and they may have bad days. Some days they may be able to do and complete the activities they want to, but there are days that they may not be able to do that. And so it's not enough for a medical record to give a diagnosis of anxiety, but there has to be an indication as to what extent it affects the person's ability to do their everyday activities and their ability to function. The other thing I mentioned, which I talked about, like a person with you know, high blood pressure, hypertension, is you know, the use of treatment. So despite appropriate treatment, now there may be people who have symptoms of anything, whether it's hypertension or it's a mental health symptom. Say a person, you know, has psychosis and is hearing voices or are paranoid. So if they take the medication, then they are able to function. You know, it takes away the voices. And so the person is now calm, they're not agitated, and they may be able to function. There are people who, despite the medication that they take, you know, the symptoms persist. They may be reduced, but they still persist, and it still may affect their ability to function on a daily basis. I mean, and that goes for, again, mental health impairments, goes for When they talk about appropriate treatment, a person says, well, I have back pain. Well, are you prescribed any pain medication? And, a person says, well, no, either the doctor doesn't, or they're not going to the doctor, and, they're dealing with it, or the doctor has prescribed, physical therapy, a course of physical therapy, and the person isn't doing it. I mean, modern medicine it can be amazing. It doesn't solve everything, but there are treatments, there's medication, there's new medication all the time, there's treatment. If a person does not avail themselves of the appropriate treatment, then they may not have proof that they are disabled, because they're not doing what they need to do to feel better and to allow them to work. I often give the example of a person came to me, their mother had a seizure disorder, but she hadn't had seizures in a long time because she was taking the medication appropriately. The family was very careful and watched over her, but because of that, and according to Social Security, you have to have a certain amount of seizures in a month, despite appropriate medication, and she had not had any seizures. So the daughter said, well, we'll just stop her medication then, so the seizures will start. And I said, well, on two levels, no, don't do that. One, don't do that so that your mother has seizures, and two, that will not prove the case because she's not following appropriate treatment. So, a person can sit in front of the judge and describe their aches and pains and all of their symptoms, but unless they're getting appropriate treatment, it's not going to prove their case. All right. And you need to show how the person's limitations affect their ability to perform work-related activities. All right. With some of the examples that I gave you before. So if you want to apply, you can apply online for a Social Security disability application. They are starting, and I don't think they're talking about doing online applications for SSI, and I think that is in the works, but I don't think it is ready yet. I could be wrong by the time that people hear this. But you can start the application online, which, and you can provide, your medical information. It still requires, at this point, this is in August, a phone interview. But I believe that at some point you'll be able to do it fully online. So you can apply for yourself if you have like a parent. If you're a minor, a parent can apply for you. Someone who has an interest in you getting the benefits, or a relative. So if they're not related, they can provide a statement, describing the relationship and to the claimant and the extent that they're responsible for your care, and why the claimant can't fill it out on their own. Okay. But if the person doesn't want to fill it out, and certainly we have people who say, no, I'm not disabled, I want to work, I don't want to fill this out. In general, you can't force a person to fill it out if they don't want to. Okay, so a person can fill out their benefits. It takes approximately 5 months for Social Security to make an initial determination. So what happens is you fill out the application, it goes to the local office. That application is then sent to a Division of Disability Determination Services, usually a state agency that collects the medical records. They give it to their medical experts and make a decision as to whether or not the person is disabled. During the course of those 5 months, they will send the claimant a series of questionnaires in terms of what they do on a daily basis, go over their work activity. They may ask a third person, like if you have a relative, to fill out that questionnaire. to give their perspective on how you're doing on a daily basis and send that in. If they don't think there's enough medical information, they may send the claimant out, to one of their doctors for a consultative examination, based on whatever impairment the person is claiming to suffer from. It's important that a person fills out the questionnaires. It's important that the claimant goes to the doctor's appointment that's scheduled, because if they don't, then Social Security can deny a person simply for non-cooperation. All right, so there are a number of reasons that a person is denied. For Social Security, they may not have worked enough, which they call insufficient quarters of coverage. I said you had to have 20 out of the past 40 quarters. For someone under the age of 30, it's less than that. But, if someone who is, 50 years old and only has, 15 quarters, then they'll be denied. If they're not disabled before the onset date expires, and this is a complicated concept, but, I told you that they had to have, they're insured until a particular date based on their quarters, all right, and when their quarters were earned. So let's say I worked for 10 years, so I have enough quarters, but I didn't work for another 20 years, or another 10 years, let's say, and then I stopped working. I'm sorry, then I became disabled. So I would not be eligible for disability benefits based on my 10 years of work, because if I became disabled 10 years later, I would not be insured. Ultimately, when I reach retirement age, I would have enough quarters. I would have my 40 quarters, but I would not be eligible for disability benefits. I usually use it's a hard thing to explain, but just to know that if you get a letter saying, we did not prove that you were disabled before a certain date, which is the date you were last insured, that's what that is. For SSI purposes, they may find that you're not financially eligible because of your current income or resources or living situation. If you're currently working and making, over the amount that SSI allows, then, and this is independent of the substantial gainful activity, if you're making over that, then they'll find you ineligible. If you have over $2,000 in resources, you will be ineligible. All right. So you can either, have to spend that money down and show how you spent it down. You can't simply, once you're denied because you have, let's say you have, $3,000 in the bank and you're only allowed to have 2,000, you can't take that $1,000 out of the bank and go in next month and reapply, because Social Security, having all of this on the computer, will say, what happened to that $1,000? And you have to show what you spent it on. You can spend it, you can't give it away, you can't give it as gifts. You can spend it on things. You could show that you went to a restaurant every day, but as long as you have the receipts, you could pay it for clothing. They don't make a judgment on what you spend it on, as long as you don't give it away. Look at, even if you went, even if you spent it at the races, but as long as you have your stubs and proved how you spent it, they would accept that. All right. They would deny you because they found that you're not disabled, because they looked at your medical records and they said, no, we don't find that all of this information that we have shows that you have a severe impairment that keeps you from doing any type of job. You should be aware that people often, at the initial levels, people are often denied. Either there's not enough information, or, the cynical approach is that it's kind of a deterrent to, hoping that people will find another job in the meantime. But but people are often denied at the initial levels, which is why you should appeal it, which is what I'll get to in a minute. People are denied for non-cooperation, as I mentioned before. If there's lack of treatment, if a person is not in any treatment, Social Security bases their decision on medical documentation. All right. That's the only thing they can base it on, not on your say so, not on a family member say so about how difficult things are for you or what your symptoms are. It has to come from a doctor. So if you're not in treatment or you've stopped treatment, Social Security will deny you. Same thing as insufficient medical evidence. And if the evidence doesn't address issues of limitations, what you can and can't do, which is a problem because often, medical records they're not going to indicate, how you get along with other people or, your level of concentration or, how far you can walk or bend, so it just may not have enough sufficient information, and there are questionnaires available, to have your doctor, and Social Security sometimes sends these questionnaires to doctors, and doctors often do not fill them out because it costs, they charge to fill it out. It's time consuming and, depending on what the questionnaire is, they may feel that they don't know the patient well enough to fill it out. So if a person is denied, there are various levels for appeal. First level is request for reconsideration. You need to, and the denial notice is very explicit in how to appeal and how many days you have to appeal. For the most part, you have 60 days to file an appeal. Appeals can be filed online. You can add additional information. You could say why you're denied, but you have to really keep within that time frame. There's a little bit of leeway. There's like 5-day leeway for mailing, and if you never got the notice, if you moved and never got the notice, if you were hospitalized or incarcerated and couldn't file the appeal on time, there are reasons, what they call good cause for late filing, and you can file, late, but, try to keep it, within the 60 days, or else you have to provide a reason as to why you're not within the 60 days. At the reconsideration level, you can add additional information. They may request additional information. If you're denied again, then you file a request for hearing. Again, you have 60 days to do that. What you're doing is you're requesting to appear before an administrative law judge. You can appear before a law judge. It is, I think, in people's best interest to get a representative at that point. You should be aware that people who represent clients in Social Security hearings are not allowed to charge a fee unless they win the case. And the fee comes out of the person's retroactive benefits, all right? Meaning that your case has been going on, you applied in 2022, you finally go in front of a judge at the end of 2023. So you get paid, if you're approved, you get paid from 2022 all the way till now. Those are your retroactive benefits. And Social Security will pay your representative out of that fund of money, and then the rest of the money goes to you, the claimant, if you win your case. If you don't win your case, you don't pay the representative. All right. If you are denied at the hearing level, you can file a request for review at the Appeals Council. Again, 60 days to get in that request. Usually, if your representative will file the review or make a determination. They kind of have to balance whether, how long it's going to be at the Appeals Council, because at this point it's like over a year. They remand it back to the same judge, and have to consider what your circumstances are. The Appeals Council can either confirm or affirm the judge's decision, which is what they do in like 90% of the time. They can reverse the judge's decision, which they do in about 1 or 2% of the time, or they can remand the decision back to the hearing level, and ask the judge to hold another hearing, because the appeals council will direct them to explain themselves, or, you know, reconsider something else, some other facet of the decision that they don't think that the judge covered in his or her written decision. And that happens probably like 10% of the time. I know it's over 100%. So actually affirming the decision is probably like 85% of the time that it occurs. And the remand is about 11 to 13% of the time at this point. So if you're denied at the appeals council level, then you file a federal court review, and you definitely needed an attorney to do that. All right. And I've never done that. I'm not an attorney, but it's a complicated process. All right. For the request for reconsideration and for the hearing, you can file an appeal online. At some point, when I talk about cessation, Social Security, if you're getting benefits and Social Security determines that you're no longer disabled, and they say, we're going to stop your benefits as of this day, you have to appeal within 10 days in order for your benefits to continue. If you don't want your benefits to continue, that's your choice, but you have to do it within 10 days. During the pandemic, Social Security was pretty lax on these time periods, but at some point they're going to go back to it. So the information that you need to provide for these cases are, updated medical information. You should tell Social Security or your representative everything that you're involved in. I know that people say, well, I only want to get benefits based on my medical problem. I don't want to let them know about my mental health problem. But Social Security needs to take everything into consideration. Say you have a back problem, and Social Security thinks, well, okay, you can do a sedentary job where you don't have to get up and walk around and don't lift. But if you don't tell them about your mental health problem, which affects your ability to, to focus and concentrate, which is maybe what's needed with a sedentary position, then, then you're not going to be approved for benefits. By the same token, if you only tell them about your mental health issues, Social Security, may decide, okay, well, you can do some active job. Let's say, you could be like a janitor because you're not talking to other people, and you're not, nothing has to be like done at a particular set time. You could work at your own pace. But you think, yeah, but I can't pick up, the mop. I can't, throw out the garbage. Those are like very heavy bags. So you have to tell them about every impairment. Okay. And you should tell them about, every other service that you get. If you're getting, supportive housing, or you're in a day program, physical therapy, everything you should tell Social Security about. Be prepared to provide them with names, addresses, phone numbers. You have to give them your medication, changes in daily activities, your living situation, anything like that. Okay. As I said, representation isn't required, but it is recommended if you go before a judge. So when you get these are places where people can get representation in New Jersey. The Law Project has offices in various parts of the state, and there are other agencies that will provide representation. Okay. After you've been approved, there are a variety of things that you need to look out for. There are overpayments. If you're overpaid for any particular reason, whether you're working and they find out that you're working, if you're over income, you can file, if they're wrong, sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they say, oh, we found out that, you've been working and therefore you have an overpayment. Sometimes we've had people who've had identity theft, and some people are working using their, that person's Social Security number. So they're racking up all of this work activity, and the person's responsible for it. So, they would file an appeal, say, that's not me. Or they'd say, no, I don't have over $2,000. I don't know where you're getting that information from. And they'd file an appeal. If their Social Security is correct, and they'd say, all right, you're correct, I did have over 2,000, or I did work, but it wasn't my fault and I can't afford to pay it back, they can file a request for waiver of overpayment. Okay. And again, you have to prove those two things, not your fault and that you can't afford to pay it back, which requires filling out a listing of income and expenses to show that your expenses consume all of your income. So again, Social Security, there are cessations where Social Security will do a medical review and determine that your medical condition has improved. And if you disagree with that, then you will file an appeal on that. They may suspend your benefits as people on SSI. If you're over $2,000 for every month that you're over, they will stop your benefits. Once you prove that you are under that amount of resources or income, you can go in and say, here's my bank account, I'm under it, please start my SSI again. If you are also, if you're hospitalized for more than a 30-day period of time or incarcerated for more than not a 30-day, a calendar month, which is the full 30 days, then you will be suspended. Once you are out of jail or out of the hospital, you would show to Social Security that you needed that you're out, and you will be put back on benefits. If you are in suspense status for 12 months, so if you're incarcerated for a long period of time, more than 12 months, your SSI benefits are terminated and you'll have to reapply. You know, the one exception, if you're hospitalized, I said if it's a calendar month, if you are if you're going to be discharged in less than 3 months and the people at the hospital notify Social Security, or you notify Social Security that you need your SSI benefits to continue to keep your housing, they will continue benefits. So if you're living by yourself, you're hospitalized, you're in the hospital for a long period of time, but you need your SSI in order to pay your rent and not lose your apartment, then they will continue it. All right. You should be aware that any changes in benefits can be appealed. Sometimes they're correct, and sometimes they're not. So if it doesn't have to do with a disability, you can request, you can file your request for reconsideration, and you can ask for an informal conference, meaning you can go in and talk to them face to face, and they can explain what it is, and you could show your evidence. So you could kind of go face to face with somebody and talk about it and prove your case, better than just having them prove it on the paper and you don't have any say in the matter. It's like, yes, but look at this, or be given an opportunity to provide another piece of evidence. If you give me this evidence, then that'll be fine. All right, so that's something to keep in mind. And again, you have to appeal within 10 days in order to get continuing or unreduced benefits. A person can work and get disability benefits at the same time. This is a rather long explanation. I've given talks on it that have taken, in and of itself, have taken like 40 to 50 minutes. So I'm just very briefly. Social Security has work incentives built into their regulations. They want people to get Social Security. Excuse me. They would like people to get off of Social Security if they can. And so they have incentives to help people to work, to try their hand out at working, and there are various formulas that help a person to continue working, keep their benefits until such point that they feel that they can work and not have the safety cushion of having their benefits. All right. And I know that people are reluctant to try their hand at working again because it's taken them so long to get their benefits that they don't want to take any risk to give it up. But they do encourage people. You will get more money working than if you're not working. And there are incentives to keep your medical insurance, while you're trying your hand at working, that will help you. So to make things difficult, the SSI and SSD have very different work incentives. So as I said before, Social Security SSI is very income sensitive, so they disregard a certain amount of your income, and they disregard $1 after the first $65 and a second of work income and a second $20 from any income. They disregard they look at your paycheck or your total month check as $1. They disregard $1 for every $2 that's earned. And they take that amount and subtract that from your Social Security, your SSI benefits. One thing for SSI that you have to remember is, or be aware of, is that since you get SSI for that month and you're working that month, they can't make that correction that month because they've already given you your SSI check. So the work that you earn in 1 month affects your SSI check 2 months later. So if you earn a certain amount of money in August, your October check will be reduced. I know that's kind of frightening, but for both SSI and SSD, we encourage people to talk to someone either at Social Security or there are various agencies that help people with work to explain the situation. If you're on Social Security, you're given what's called a 9-month trial work period. Any month that's earned $1,050 a month within a 5-year period. So, and it doesn't affect your benefits at all. All it does is it lops off a trial work month. After that, after month 9 is used up, within that 5-year period, you're given a 36-month extended period of entitlement or eligibility. And any month that you earn over substantial gainful activity, which this year is 1,470, every year that amount increases, then you're not entitled to your benefits for that month. And if once you hit month 37 and go over the substantial gainful activity amount, then you will be terminated from Social Security disability. But you're talking like, 36 months and 9 months, that's 45 months, that's almost 4 years of support and work incentives. And Medicare will continue. And we encourage you, if you do work, to report your work earnings to Social Security on a timely basis. And by that, it means within the first 10 days after the full month that you start working. So if you start working, August 5th, you should be reporting your work activity in the beginning of by September 10th. All right. You should not assume that Social Security knows how much you're making, or that the IRS is reporting your work activity, or even that your job coach is reporting it, or that they find out eventually. They do find out eventually, but then you have an overpayment, okay? And you want to avoid that. So I encourage people to report it, and it's best not to call the 800 number, but just to, if you, submit your pay stubs and send it by mail, or call the local office, get the name of the person that you spoke to, and keep track of when you called, what you reported, so that you have that proof. New Jersey workability, it's for people who are on Social Security disability. They're allowed to make a certain amount a year. It's people who would not be eligible for Medicaid because they're getting too much on Social Security disability, and it allows them to get Medicaid just working a certain small amount. And I know I'm running out of time. So if you have any questions, you could call our office. If you're in the Union County area, you can contact, on one of the previous slides, we had our information about the law project as a whole. You can go online and, any of our offices for Social Security, any of the other information, or the contact people on that slide. We encourage you to ask questions, and if you're currently getting benefits and have a question, we encourage you to, contact Social Security or contact one of our agencies, because it's better to ask a question than to, make an assumption or to be worried about something or to make a mistake, you know, so you need to get the assurances that you're doing the right thing or going in the right direction. So thank you very much. It's if you know, sorry I can't answer any questions, but you know, I'm happy to provide this information for you. Thank you.